A lot of people who communicate with me online ask me questions about looping and my style and how I go about doing all that. And when I'm out playing live, I always overhear conversations trying to pick apart exactly what I'm doing with my gear. And a lot of people have presumptions that I can eavesdrop into that are not correct. So I figured it's long overdue that I talk about how I do what I do and how it's all related to this little guy right here. This is a loop pedal, the Boss RC-5 loop station. I did not start out on this beast. I started out with Digitech Jamman pedals, a couple different iterations of that series. RIP all the Jammans, they all died because they had stupid proprietary adapters that are too expensive and obnoxious to replace. So I eventually had to upgrade to the Boss RC-5. Now, if you're a musician and you want to get into looping, it doesn't really matter where you start because looping as a concept is going to be the same no matter what kind of gear that you are using. Now, I am a live performer. Everything that I'm doing is from scratch on the spot. When a performer uses a traditional backing track, which I have no issue with, by the way, it is a pre-recorded instrumental for a song that usually includes anything you'd expect in a full production. You have, the drums, the bass, the parts. If it's somebody playing covers, it could easily just be an instrumental of the song you recognize minus a guitar and vocal part so that they can perform on top of it. It is pre-rendered, pre-recorded, mixed, mastered, and plays just like an MP3 or a WAV file, whatever, just like something you listen to on your own time, except they've subtracted the parts that they're going to play live. There's nothing wrong with backing tracks. There's a lot of instances where using a backing track in a live setting might make sense. Like, let's say you're a very advanced guitarist playing, some really crazy instrumental shred music or something, and you can't really find a band that's going to fit well with that, but you still want to showcase your skills. There's nothing wrong with using a backing track to do that or to carry a certain type of sound. With a live loop, I'm creating every single sound that you hear in the mix, the drum sounds, the bass sounds, and all of the other wacky little things I toss in there by using my double neck guitar and my line of effects pedals ran into this looper. In this case, I'm producing the backing track on the spot. Is it still technically a backing track? Well, yes, because it's the backing track to me playing. But the difference is where somebody who's using a traditional backing track is bringing in a file, or it could even be, like a CD of instrumentals. They're playing along with instrumentals that were created in a studio space, and they're bringing that out live. What I'm doing is producing those tracks using my instrument and effects to mimic drum sounds, bass sounds, and other percussive elements, and I'm doing all of that from scratch. I'm basically doing what I like to do here in my creative space, live and in front of your faces. And so it adds a different kind of element. Again, there's absolutely no harm in using backing tracks, and there are many performers who will definitely benefit from using a backing track if they can't put a band together that meets their style, but they still want to show off their skills. If they have something last minute and they need something, an accompaniment, but they can't find anybody to join them or any other reasonable option. There's plenty of viable reasons to use a traditional backing track too. I just prefer being a live looper because it adds the live element, and then I get to showcase my passion, which isn't necessarily playing guitar, but arranging and producing, composing music and building layers on layers and going deeper and deeper and seeing how much I can add to the sound. Naturally, the next step would be to show all you guys how I actually do it and how it works. A lot of musicians might already know, some might not know, and the general public, I feel like, is either really on or really off with how they guess what's going on. So I think it's time to plug everything in and show you guys what's up. This is my loop setup. For the sake of this video, we're only going to be looking at the bare bones loop setup and apparently a cat. I will not be hooking up the boogie board, which is just my pedal board here, that adds the extra effects today. We are going to focus simply on a guitar straight into the looper for the time being. Now, like I said at the beginning, I am personally using a Boss RC-5 loop station. This is the more advanced single channel small stomp box pedal looper in the series, but the Boss RC-1, which I will toss up on screen now, is a more affordable option and simplified option if you want to get started. I'd always recommend something a little less computerized to get started, just because it'll help train you more traditionally in the sense of learning rhythms and building on your own. I don't really use any of the advanced features this pedal has to offer, but I do like having a more advanced system on board, and it was the only thing available at the time I needed to replace my Digitech pedals in an emergency. So that's how we ended up here. And here's a cat again. Boss pedals aren't the only loopers available. There are literally dozens, if not hundreds, of different loopers from tens of dozens of different companies out there, and all of them are going to achieve the same basic functionality. I would say that Boss is kind of like the mainstream industry standard for looping, since it seems like most people that I've watched come up in the loop world have used Boss products, but it is certainly not something you have to jump on. It's just where I ended up, and I really like this station. But again, it's little bro. The RC-1 is a simplified and also more affordable version that will achieve pretty much the same thing with pretty much the same setup that I have here. Again, there's just some extra features on here that we'll talk about later. So to get this whole thing set up, we need a couple of cables, and I prefer to use a 9-volt adapter. You can use a 9-volt battery by getting inside of the pedal. I prefer a wire connection just because I don't want to have to constantly replace batteries and unscrew the board, etc., etc. So you'll need whichever is your preference, a 9-volt adapter or a 9-volt battery. We have one TS guitar cable. We have another TS guitar cable for the output, and then we have a TRS cable for our accessory foot switch here. What a TRS cable is, and you can see that you need it here, it allows two signals to be sent and communicated with, as opposed to the single mono signal that this and this will be sending from the guitar. The reason being is because you have two separate switches built into one, and in order to control them independently, you have to use the matching TRS cable. One of these channels, as represented by the bands on the cable, will be programmed to A, whereas the other will send a signal to B, giving you independent control. The dual TRS will go in the very top slot to control the foot switch. As you can see, it's a stop and memory shift control option, and then that will link here. Now again, you don't have to have the accessory. There are stop functions that you can control on board from the looper, but to stop a loop without the accessory, you have to press it twice vigorously with your foot, and that is very difficult if you are trying to do accurate phrases, because you're going to throw off the rhythm and beat by sitting there and trying to stomp off rhythm to stop the loop. So if you're using a Boss pedal, whether it's the Little Bro RC-1 and RC-5 or anything else in this family, I would always recommend getting the accessory. It's going to run you a little extra. I'll throw up the current common MSRP right now just so you can get an idea, but it is 100% worth the accuracy and control that you're going to get from this series of pedals. Again, you do not have to use Boss pedals. It's just kind of an industry standard at this point from what I can gather, and I've really enjoyed my experience. So now we have our accessory plugged in, and notice that it has powered on upon being plugged in. That's because you can only power this with a 9-volt battery. There is no adapter space on here. However, it performs such a simple task and does not require much power to operate, so I'd say a single 9-volt battery lasts this thing up to 4 months, even during heavy performance periods for me. Next up, we're going to want to plug in our instrument. We're going to send that to A, because as you can see, A does go mono, and that's what we're doing. This is a stereo looper, which means there are two separate outputs to divide the sound, but in my situation, that doesn't make any sense, because I'm playing one instrument, sending one signal through, and I want that to color the entire sound space. If I were to try and output this to B, for example, I would only end up in one of my speakers if I'm running stereo. So yeah, that just doesn't make sense for me. There are applications for that, for performers, producers, etc. But for the sake of being simple and for what I actually do live, this is how it goes. We have another TS, which is just the single unbalanced mono cable here. You can use TRS if you want to for noise cancellation. You see that my pedal has activated. When you plug in a output cable. That is how you turn on these loop stations. Mine has switched on without the adapter because it does have one of the batteries that came along with it. But the cool thing about this pedal is that if you do switch to adapter use, the pedal recognizes it and cancels the battery inside. So that means if you want to run with an emergency battery in case something goes awry with this, there will be one that's there on deck, and as soon as you unplug it, it will actually begin to power up from the battery source, and it has that built-in kill switch, which is an amazing function because I don't like to swap batteries, but I also know that adapters can be futile sometimes in situations. Something might get broken, and it's amazing to just be able to unplug and hop in. Again, I'm not replacing batteries all the time. It is just an emergency measure and a great feature for this piece of equipment that makes me a huge fan. Everything is powered up and hooked up. I am outputting from here up to the interface on the computer, and then actually have a pedal view set up for you here in OBS to record at the same time I do the face cam with my phone here, so I can show you everything that's going on. Dark blue means that there is nothing saved on this channel. If I push this button, it starts recording and you hear nothing because there's nothing going on. Now, once I've started a loop, as you can see, even though I've recorded silence, it still recorded what it thought was an incoming signal. So now, over here, I have my A and B set to stop on B and clear on A. So watch this. If you record a loop, it starts red. Once you set the loop, it's green. Whatever you created is now playing. Obviously, it's playing silence. You can't hear anything. I can't hear anything because nothing actually got recorded, but I still push the button, so it's still pulling a signal. Once you push the button again, you'll see a yellow cue on this looper. Now, with the RC-5, you'll get these cool color codes. It varies. Some loopers don't have them at all, but the concept is the same. The colors just help to illustrate it. Yellow represents an overdub. When you record on top of a loop that's already going, you can record inside of the space that you've created. So if I looped 4 bars of me playing guitar, or even if you loop nonsense, since I don't use any quantize feature, you'll just play something on top and it'll catch it within that phrase. You push it again, and now you added that section to the loop. If you don't like what you did, you can hold this down. You'll see it turns yellow for a moment and then goes back to green. It has just removed whatever layer I added. Now, if I want to stop, I personally push B, but you can actually program this pedal to assign whatever command you want. We're not going to get into that right now because, again, if you're using the RC1, it will automatically be set so it is a stop and clear button. When you see this light blue cue on this particular loop, that means there is currently a loop set here because I have played it. Now, the reason you want to jump out of a loop is so you can maybe play a solo section, change things up, let the guitar or vocals shine through naturally without the loop track, and then bring it back for a chorus or a big punch or something, then stop it and drop out and change. But if you want to get rid of it altogether, I push this button. Now watch. That light blue has just gone back to dark blue, which means we are once again empty. There is nothing here. As you can see up and down my looper, I have absolutely no saved patterns. I think it goes 1 to 99. Everything is dark blue because I don't save anything. It's all from scratch. Now, before I begin looping, I push this button here. Loop level 100. Now that means 100% of the output volume is currently reserved to the loop. You can bring that value up or down so that the loop itself is louder or quieter. Now, for the sake of going over and going up further, over 100%, let's say you had like a quiet phrase or recorded something quietly, you wanted to bring it up dynamically, but didn't want to actually get rid of the loop, you could bring it up. But for the sake of what I'm doing, and I'll bring the lighting down again so you can see, I typically set my loop to about 70 or 75. So that means about 75% of the total output is going to be the sound from the loop. That gives me 30% for my guitar and vocals. Now the vocals are on a separate channel, so in this case it's technically 25% guitar in the leads. It also leaves room in the mixer that you're outputting to for vocals because, again, it gets very overwhelming if you have a 100% loop running a guitar signal on top of that and trying to sing on top or add other instrumentation. I like to keep it at 75%, and that's where my loop will fall. It will be 75% of the output signal. That leaves 25% for my guitar and vocals to fill. It helps out in the looper because the guitar doesn't get muddy, and it helps in the master mix because there's just less instrumental taking up space from the output signal. So again, we press to record, and now we'll have a 75% loop. It will go on green. It will continue. If I want to add, I will go to yellow, and I will stomp every individual layer that is different. So each moving part might be shorter or the same length as the original bar that you're recording over. And I'll demonstrate that here in a second. When I'm done or I need to bump out, I stop it, and when I'm ready to start over on a new song, I delete it. You can see all of those commands in real time. Again, not every single looper is this sophisticated. It won't have like the color codes and cool little glitz and glam that this one does necessarily, but the concept is the same everywhere. If you understand that your first tap is record, every other tap is overdub, and then you can stop and erase. Those are the primary functions of a looper. There are other settings that are good for practice here, like rhythm mode, which I currently have off. As you can see, if I turn it on, the light will blink like this. What this is going to do is add drum tracks and other elements to the loop that I otherwise could not create on my own. Now I'm restarting to get out of that mode, by the way. And it's a good practice tool, but I'll dive deeper into that on another occasion. Okay, so you are hearing me, my voice, and the guitar itself, plus the back noise from the speakers behind me because I'm running straight into my interface, and then the webcam down here is picking up my feet. And so you will see exactly the correspondence between what I'm doing up here and down here because we'll have both angles going so I can properly demonstrate. Today I'll be using my Yamaha Trans acoustic electric guitar. It does have built-in effects, but I'm not using any of those. I'm not using any additional effects pedals, just simply the looper and its AB accessory, so I can show you bare bones what I'm doing. Now that we have sound, I'll show you that the looper will record anything, no matter how good or how bad on or off beat it is, and it will capture it tick for tack when I start and stop the click. So first let's play something really shitty and see what happens. See, that sounds like nonsense. The reason it sounds like nonsense is because it is nonsense. I do not use any of the quantized features or any training wheels, if you will, when it comes to my looper. It is set simply to pick up what I do and carry the phrase from where I stop and started. Therefore, if I play something very shitty, even though it is recording, it's not doing any sort of editing, it will sound like garbage. See, those were very bad loops. And the reason those were very bad loops, this cable is fucking way too much for this space. By the way, this cable is messy. I'm like stepping on it. People are gonna drill me in the comments, but it doesn't matter. This is for a demo. The point is that the loop is not really doing anything to help me aside from repeating me, myself, back to me. So the looper is only as good as the user, unless you're using quantized features. But again, that is more of a practice tool, something to help you get better. It takes away from the live element if you use those extra tools that are available on some loopers, so I would go as vanilla as possible like I'm doing right here. Understanding rhythm is a key to a good loop. The easiest beat to start with is 4 on the floor, because if you can count to 4 and you can do it over and over again in sequence, you can make this loop. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. You see my foot kicked on 1 and then 1 again. I started recording on 1 and then I looped it back at 1. It starts and stops where I ask it to start. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I got a beat, but by itself that's pretty boring. You see, this is where I get my drum sounds. People ask, where do you get your drum sounds? It comes from the guitar. This is my bass drum doing 4 on the floor. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It knows to carry the loop back on 1 after 4. But that's a little boring, so we need like a snare sound. Again, no effects, nothing special. Instead of tapping my strings, I'm going to give them a good chuck. Everything's muted. I'm going to chuck them like 1, 2, 3, 4. That's in a lot of music. Most music, as a matter of fact, the beat is going to be the bass on 1 and 3 and the snare on 2 and 4. Now, of course, that's not always true. There's different beats, but the most basic of beats is almost always the kick on 1 and 3 and the snare on 2 and 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I have the bass on all of them to add some depth. It adds something to the low end. Now we can start doing like a riff. We'll do simple blues. You know blues? So I add some chords. We got some blues now. Yeah. Now I want to take a solo, so I stopped recording. I got my band now. Hold this down to get rid of the extras. Now we're just back to our beat. And stop. We're back to nothing. See, I touch it, nothing happens because it's all gone. I said bye-bye to the old loops. But it all starts with getting the equipment set up correctly, regardless of if it's a setup like mine or maybe a ditto pedal. It doesn't matter what kind of looper you have, as long as you understand the record, overdub, stop, and clear functions, and as long as you can count to 4 in sequence, because if you can count to 4, you can do it fast too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. What if you just play chords? Who cares? And that is the basics of looping. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. If you're watching on the YouTube, if you're watching anywhere else, just, watch it over and over again. Tell your mom, tell your dad, your brothers, your sisters, your husbands and wives that I'm really cool. I do really cool stuff with guitars and pedals, and you should watch. And I hope to do a lot more informative stuff. This is just breaking the ice on basic live looping, what it is, how it works. I hope you guys learned something today. I hope if you play guitar or are interested in looping, that maybe this helped you out. Make good choices. Whoa! Ho ho! Hee hee! Ha ha! Hoo! Ha ha!